I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes. Hi, and welcome everyone to Searching for Heroes. I'm Benjamin Hall. This episode begins a new chapter in the podcast where we explore a single theme across several conversations. And we are starting with a powerful one, solitude. Now, why solitude? Because we all face it, sometimes by choice, sometimes not. It can be a space of peace or a test of survival. And for many, it reveals who we really are beneath the noise. My guest today, Chris Fagan, understands that in a way few ever will. In 2013, she and her husband Marti became the first married couple to ski unsupported to the South Pole. They were flown by a small plane to the edge of the Antarctica near the Ron Ice Shelf. From there, they embarked on a 570-mile expedition to the bottom of the world, with no guides, no resupply, each dragging 220-pound sleds for 10 hours a day for 48 days. Chris has written an incredible book called The Expedition: Two Parents Risk Life and Family in an Extraordinary Quest to the South Pole. And she will be joining me today. I have to say that what they discovered out there wasn't just this vast frozen wilderness, and she writes about this in her book. She says that they discovered the raw truth of solitude, its beauty, its brutality, and its unexpected gifts. So let's dive in and speak today to Chris. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Glad to be here today.
Chris, you've experienced something that very few people ever will. And I want to talk all about what it was like and the experiences and what you learned. But I wondered if you could just set the scene, first of all. Tell us what inspired you and your husband to take on this extreme expedition to the South Pole.
Right. Well, my husband and I actually met while climbing Mount McKinley, which is really called Denali now, in Alaska. And we were on separate expeditions. And we, pretty much met on the mountain. And then he, 6 weeks later moved from Hawaii to the Seattle area. And so with that as our foundation, we both had adventure as something we loved, and we independently loved it, and then we mutually loved it together as a couple. And adventure's been a theme in our marriage since then. And over the years, we had done various adventures. We became ultra runners, running 100-mile races through the mountains. And, we did a lot of mountain climbing, and then sort of it became this pinnacle of our journey. We were like, well, what could be, how could we use all this experience that we have? And we were really drawn to the South Pole because of its wildness. It's a place that is almost like nowhere else on Earth, a place that could use our skills, but push us to feel like we're growing and learning in new ways. And actually, that's why we adventure, is as we venture to places that are beyond what we think we can even endure or experience, we find places in ourselves that we didn't know existed, that we grow in places in ways that we aren't even expecting. And so I think setting the scene is more like we like to do bold and wild things, but we always walk away more bonded as a couple and learning something about ourselves. And that's why we did it.
It's so interesting because so many people go off on adventures, and I suppose they do so for different reasons. Is it the thrill? Is it you want to learn and grow? And you sort of said it right there, that you go off on adventures because you want to learn more, you want to experience more. So when you went to the South Pole, was solitude, was being alone for so long one of the things that you were aware you were going into? Is that something that you wanted to sort of conquer or understand or appreciate?
I wouldn't say that it definitely wasn't a goal, but it was definitely an understanding that, hey, this is like nothing we've ever done before. Nothing. And knowing that not only solitude, but being alone is kind of different than solitude in my definition. Being alone, possibly facing loneliness, and also the promise of solitude, because I feel like solitude is more of that sort of joyful place within me that we try to we try to get to in our regular life, that it's so busy sometimes we can't find it. And I find it, in little pieces by going on hikes and things, but this would be a massive ability to see that. It wasn't the goal, but it was definitely an understanding of part of the challenge.
That's so interesting that you've broken it down, because other people that I've spoken to say solitude is the opposite. Solitude is when you feel alone and lonely, but you are seeing it as, in the normal life, a place that you want to go to. And so break that down. You talked about loneliness versus solitude, and I suppose the bigger question is, there must be moments in your life today when you are at home, then when you are still looking for solitude. What does that give you?
So the way I was thinking about this is that, well, going to the South Pole, one of the things that really struck me from the moment I got there, so we take this plane, this small plane, it drops us off in the middle of nowhere, and you're just dropped off by yourself. There's no guide, and you see this red plane fly away, and there you are,
Like
in the piercing silence. I mean, there it goes, and you're like, the expedition is just in front of you. You're looking all around. It's white nothingness. It's a sunny day, which was lovely, and there's a piercing silence, right? It's a silence we find hard to find anywhere. And so silence was a driver for me in starting to think about these two things, solitude and loneliness, because the silence was profound, and it started to make me feel throughout the journey on those good days, that solitude, almost this solace feeling of a peacefulness, a sort of one with nature. I love nature so much. That's why I go into it. Feeling like I lose myself and I become like part of the forest or part of the white landscape. Whereas the loneliness starts creeping in the silence. And so for the silence, it gives me space to feel this. Whereas that silence, sometimes when I'm mentally struggling in this particular journey, you're really pushing hard. You're really pushing yourself physically and mentally. And you're doing it with your husband by your side, but you're in your own worlds. It's so you're just following in a line. You're not having conversation during the day. So it's very, very lonely at times when you're not feeling that kind of flow and oneness feeling. You feel more lonely. When it got hard, it felt lonely. And we're in our own individual struggles, moving together in our own worlds. And that definitely made me feel lonely at times and crave connection. And I think that's the same when you just asked about my life as well. In daily life, we find this to be true as well. So, that's how I'm thinking about it.
What was the thought process? I mean, like you're 10 hours a day, you're pulling these heavy sleds. Are you constantly thinking, how long can you think, pull? How long can you think, it's beautiful here? At some point, where does your mind go eventually when you can't keep thinking the same things? And is there a freedom at some point where you can, or is it the opposite? Do you reach a point where you don't know what to think about? So it's difficult to understand for those who haven't done it.
I think that is a great insight, because it's almost like what I was just describing. It's sort of this tension, and you don't really know what you're going to get that day, because it is sort of like Groundhog Day. You're going out there pulling this sled, and what kind of weather are we going to face today? Some days you're so focused on the environment because you're surviving. You're in that survival mode. The environment's very bad today. The wind chill is 40 below. The wind is feeling like it's going to push me over. If I lose any piece of gear to the wind, I can get frostbite in a second, So you're so micro-focused on every movement that you cannot think of anything else. You almost feel like if I lose focus, something bad could happen. And the way the way we went, the way we navigated is one person was navigating, the other person was following. So you got a little break by following, and then we switched every hour because you are so focused. It's actually quite tiring. Now that's not all the time. So you're very focused. You almost aren't thinking of anything else but like breathe. You hear the scraping of your skis, you're breathing, you're moving, you're looking at your compass, you're constantly looking at your compass because there's nothing on the landscape to navigate towards. So you're literally looking at your compass every 10 seconds, every 20 seconds, making sure you're not diverting off of that. And am I warm enough? Am I too cold? Because if you start sweating, then you can freeze inside your clothing, and that's not good. It can cause hypothermia. Yeah. So it's all these micro things you're thinking about. But on days when it's really sort of lovely and it's not sort of like crazy outside, yes, you do have time to think, and it spans the globe. It spans whatever you can imagine. So sometimes you're thinking about, back home and your family and who you miss and lovely food that you wish you could have and all of these comforts that you're missing. Sometimes you are going along and you look at your watch and 4 hours have passed and you can't even believe it. It's like you've been transported to this kind of flow state that we get into when we're doing creative endeavors or physical endeavors. So it really spans all of the sort of spectrum of things that you think about.
Are there moments where you feel you've just walked for many, many miles and you look down and it's only been 10 minutes? So happen the other way too.
Yes. Especially if you're trying to navigate in a whiteout.
Yeah.
Every step you feel like, okay, we must have gone. It must be time to switch. It must be time for me to not be leading anymore. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's been 3 minutes. So, because in those days, you start to feel like, imagine being inside an eggshell, all white, and there's no up or down, and you're skiing. And, people think it's flat in Antarctica, but it's not. So there's undulating terrain. There's this wind-blown waves of snow that's called sastrugi that you're skiing over. You have to go through it. So it's these bumps. So when it's a whiteout, you feel like you're going to fall over and trip like all day if you're in this sort of terrain. Yeah.
You mentioned briefly there, sort of the 4 hours that just fly by. Like, would you say that is reaching this sort of place of peace, of real clarity? And I wonder, is it possible to reach that in the normal world? There were so many things going on with the hectic world. Isn't that something that we should all try and experience? But perhaps it's quite hard to do when you are living your daily life. But was that rewarding?
Yes, it was quite rewarding. So you're right. You become so at peace. It's really a way I've learned to be present. It's really a presence. It's really I'm not worried about the next few seconds, and I'm not worried about what just happened yesterday. I'm just here. I'm experiencing this moment. I'm so in this moment, I can't even wonder about other things. And then I get myself to experience that moment and not think about the moment. So it's just an experience. And I think there are ways to do that in our day-to-day life to get it yourself there. I mean, I think a lot of people do that through different practices in, mindfulness meditation, or they might do yoga, or they might do just your walk around the neighborhood. It's sort of putting yourself in that mindset of, I'm just going to enjoy that bird chirping over there, or look at that flower, or, smell that in the air. Oh, that's lovely. These sorts of things. And It might just be for a moment, but if you can expand that, it really is kind of otherworldly. I think it feels like that.
I totally feel that, because when I was in hospital after I was injured, there were those moments, and those small moments, and often it was a bird that I would see. It was a beautiful piece, sunlight. Those moments just lifted everything else that was going on. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have to be long, actually. They could be very small. And sometimes, perhaps, if we're talking about solitude and the loneliness for some people, sometimes just finding those short little moments can give you that breath again and encourage you to keep going. And maybe that's, I suppose, what people should be looking for. Do you think you can train for this sort of resilience? And I would call it resilience. I mean, not many people want to go and trek to the South Pole. So there's resilience in you. Were you born with this sort of resilient strength, or can you train to become this, to develop this?
I do believe you can train to become more resilient. I believe that I had a really solid foundation in my life by having really supportive parents who allowed me to explore and said yes. They were yes parents. They were parents who, if I said I'd like to try this or I'd like to go do this, it was often yes. And I rarely felt, judged or that sort of thing. So I think you build resilience by small steps. You build confidence and you did something, and then okay, and I can do something else. And then you push a little further and I can do this. So the confidence your resilience builds because you're building upon this experience, this mountain of experience. It's kind of like how I started running. I didn't really like to run. And so then one day I did 3 miles, and then I just kept going. And then pretty soon, 2 years later, my husband's like, hey, I think we should run a 100-mile race. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to train for that. That's crazy. There's no way I can do that. I can't run for 100 miles. And lo and behold, you lay out a training plan. You do it step by step. And each barrier that you push through, you say, oh, okay, well, if I can do 50 miles, I can do 60 miles, and I can do 60 miles. So it just builds. Right. Mm. And that's how we trained for the South Pole expedition as well. And having all that experience, had we not had that experience, it would just seem like something crazy that we're going to get injured or something. But having that,
yeah. I wonder if the people who are really productive in life, maybe they have to see life in that way. Instead of just only thinking of the end goal, you just think about the next step. You just keep building towards things. And I think maybe that's why some people can do it and some people can't, is because things build slowly. Nothing happens overnight. Mm-hmm. And if you can have that patience, then perhaps that makes you far more productive.
I agree. I think the patience, it goes hand in hand with endurance, because these are really endurance endeavors. And there's not a quick hit of like, yay, I did it. We're done, move on. It's definitely, and it's finding that motivation, what is motivating you to keep getting out there, keep doing this. Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned parents and you came from a good foundation. So many people I speak to, that's what it comes down to. It is parents and family. But I have to ask, you had children when you and your husband went off. And it's quite interesting that what lesson were you how old were they when you went?
So I have one child, and so he was 12 when we went.
So what do you say to your one child when you're setting off on something that's very dangerous, both you and your husband? Mm-hmm. What did you think that would teach him? And did you ever, when you were out there in the middle of nowhere, did that ever cross your mind? Did you ever sort of second guess that you had decided to do this or not?
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we had many conversations, so there wasn't one. And it took us 3 years of planning and preparing to really fully, from the time we had the idea to going. And so Keenan is my son's name. It was part of our planning and preparing, and became part of the journey with us as far as training. Mm-hmm. And we built a foundation with Keenan that adventure is part of our culture in our family. It's a value that we have. It helps us learn and grow. And
he climbed Kilimanjaro with you when he was 10, is that right?
He did. We didn't quite make it to the top, but he because he got some nausea, but he got very high, and he biked around Mount Kilimanjaro when he was 7 with us. He was taking on adventures, and he was understanding this mindset. Now, of course, he was concerned about where am I going to be while you're doing this? So we had family here staying at our home so he could be well cared for. But what we told him is that, we really want to show you how to live a full and happy life where you pursue what makes you feel most alive. And mom and dad are going to do that. And that's what we did. And we had a satellite phone with us. So we planned and we called him every other day from Antarctica and spoke with him. I never had any regrets while I was there. But it was really difficult at times when we spoke with him, and then we were whipped back into our environment, and our focus had to be really on Antarctica. So it was definitely a tension there.
Yeah.
He's now 23, and he speaks quite fondly of the time that we were gone, as far as being able to bond with some of his, being an only child, he was able to bond with his, it was mostly my siblings, his aunts and uncles who were caring for him. And they have a lot of great experiences and inside jokes to sort of lean on and have that as, their adventure here while we were gone.
Isn't that interesting that something you may not have thought was going to be a real positive turned out to have become one, and their relationship really grew as a result of that. More of our conversation right after this. Were there any sort of really difficult moments, sort of like emotional breakdowns, or moments when you were out there that it felt almost too hard to carry on?
Absolutely. This was a 48-day expedition. And in our normal life, over 48 days, we have weekends and time off. And in order to make our goal, we were carrying so much food, right? And, there's just an equation. You have this food, and if it's gone, you don't have any more food. There's nowhere to get food. It's just what you brought. And we had calculated that we would go so fast each day, but our calculation was a few miles too fast. So we were going slower than we thought. So, we would be pushing ourselves longer and longer because we don't want to run out of food, right? So by day 39, I remember this, day 39 of the 48-day expedition was sort of what you just described as our sort of D-Day of a bit of a breakdown. We had small breakdowns throughout, but the exhaustion and the wear and tear of our bodies, and also of our mental states, because we had one rest day out of the entire time. So every single day you're getting up and moving 8 to 10 hours a day, a couple hours of chores to set up your tent, etc. So yes, emotionally, we're sitting in the tent, and Marti and I are exhausted, and I think we need to take another rest day. Marti thinks we're going to run out of food if we do. It was a complete standoff, and all of the emotional tension that was building landed us in that moment. And we are a very strong couple, but in that moment, it was like we were on, two separate islands in the same tent. And, we both, when you're so exhausted, it's hard to, sort of get the other person to see your way. And it was sort of like, we need to rest. No, it was, so we have that satellite phone, and we have a really good friend, mutual friend, that we called, and it was sort of extending that, getting our argument and our tension and all of our emotional stress over to another person who could look in with clear eyes really helped us. And that's actually how we sort of compromised and were able to move through that situation.
That's so interesting. So that is reaching out to someone sort of outside of, you two to get that extra support.
Yes. And, yes, we were completely isolated. Yes, we were completely on our own, but that satellite phone was a lifeline for sure. Absolutely. And that was not the intention. We had it thinking that would be a safety thing, but it became more of a mental lifeline.
It's so interesting. And I think I had the answer to this. I think both are correct, but whether resilience grows more when in solitude or when you are in connection with others, you obviously need both, I would say. I think everyone needs to both be comfortable by themselves to think really deeply, but you also need to have someone to bounce ideas off. So would you agree that you need both in life?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can think of many in this microcosm of this experience that we're just discussing. That was happening all the time. It was bouncing between solitude, and then you're feeling lonely, and then you want to have conversation with your husband, but he's more of an introvert, you're more of an extrovert. You want to have that debrief at the end of the day because you've been in your head all day. He wants to just debrief in silence. So you're like, like I'm craving connection. He's not ready for connection yet. So it was just this constant dance of all of those different concepts that you just described. And for me, being an extrovert, this experience forced me to become more introverted and feel what it's like to not have that with me all the time, that ability to have somebody, to have external kind of things. So I became much more internal focused. And at first that wasn't a comfortable place for me, even though I'm an introspective kind of person. It was uncomfortable. And I remember writing about it. It's like, I feel uncomfortable. But as the journey went on, I became comfortable. And that definitely stuck with me throughout that, after that time. Sorry, go. I was also going to say, and then in writing a book, it's the same journey. It's so just me. And it allowed me to sit, allowed me to not have to go have a distraction and just be with myself for long periods of time.
Yeah, that's what I was fascinated about, is when you went back to everyday life, sort of how did your relationship, either solitude, change, or how did you change? I mean, suddenly you finish, you're on a plane, you're suddenly back in the whole world and everything's moving. Were you a different person? Did it take some time to get back to normal? Were you changed forever? Like, what was it like as you went home?
Right. Definitely took a while to sort of feel back to normal, but I think it is a new normal. I think it's a new normal for sure. After being away from everything for that period of time, just everything sort of boils down to the simplest of things in life. And so do I have shelter? Can I have some food? And is there a chair available? These are the things at first, because you're sitting in a tent all of the time. And of course that's changed over the years, but I'm just more grateful for just those simplest of things, that we don't need all these things that we have. And I think that has definitely changed me. And just sort of that gratitude is always sort of more present. And also being more present, being able to sit with struggle and challenge and being okay with that, and because I know tomorrow's another day and it will maybe be different. And so it's changed my ability to handle, I guess, everyday anxieties and stresses.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And I know the two scenarios are totally different, but again, my own experience, and I was away for 6 months and I came home and I just feel like I had a better appreciation. Things felt much more simple. You appreciated just the really basic things that you had, and perhaps realized that beforehand you were caught up in this hectic world all the time. And actually, experiences like that, huge experiences like that, can really reset you in some cases. And do you think that everyone should perhaps try, not obviously trek to the South Pole, but should everyone take a moment, a week, some time to try and reset, to try and find that? Would that be really healthy?
If somebody can do that and afford the time to do that, I can't imagine how it could not be healthy.
Yeah.
I think that, just getting yourself into a different kind of space, mindset, time frame, it really is beneficial in countless ways.
Do you want to go and do it again? I mean, it's something like that. Like, does the rest of life sometimes feel you've achieved this incredible thing? You have pushed yourself to the limits. You've done something. Does everything after that does it not hit that point? Do you feel that sometimes?
Yeah, I don't want to do that again.
Oh, no.
So that's clear for me because, there's just a lot of so many challenges
Yeah.
involved in that.
But
But
something
I
like
understand what
long
you're saying.
distance running, etc. Like
Yeah, for
you
sure.
keep doing things like that.
Yes, definitely keep doing things. I would say, I was 50 years old when I did that. And so, as far as pushing my body that hard, that's not something that we see doing. But for sure, since that time, we have done all kinds of adventures that, one of them being we were in this race to Alaska where you're basically paddling and sailing through the inside passage up to through the inside passage to Alaska. So that was a major adventure that was had a lot of challenges. Didn't take as long, but we've been to Everest Space Camp with my son. A couple years after we did this, we've done a variety of things. So just not quite as big, but that just getting, even if it's a micro adventure, a weekend, it gives me that same feeling. We like to run around Mount St. Helens, which is out here in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a 30-mile route, and it's one of the most beautiful here. And that just gives me that same feeling, even though I don't have to, push myself quite as hard, right? And I'll say this, that this is sort of a different thing for you, but you're talking about your accident, and 2 years after we got back, we discovered my husband discovered he had a little lump in his clavicle and had it checked out. Anyway, turns out he had cancer. So we've been battling. He's had stage 4 cancer for 9 years, and all of the things that we've learned through these experiences that we've talked about have been, in this adventure that we didn't choose, which is cancer. And in the last year, it's gotten, he was able to deal with it, but in the last year, it's gotten quite a bit worse. And, definitely the themes that we're talking about today, as far as, isolation or solitude, and, these are true. When you're going through, when you're going through some kind of health issue, it can be quite isolating. It can feel, lonely.
Yeah.
So the skills that we learned, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but the skills that we learned definitely apply here.
Yeah. No, I absolutely feel that as well. And I imagine that there's a level of strength that you must have gained from your experiences that perhaps allows you to move through something like that in a different way, in a positive way, not positive, but in a break it down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it gives us more confidence because we've bonded through all these hard struggles that we chose to do. We know that we have that fabric in our marriage, and that to be able to hold each other up, even in this struggle that, we don't have the solution to.
Yeah. Well, it's today, as an aside, today is my 10th wedding anniversary. And my wife, was there side by side when our whole lives changed. And I've been thinking a lot about that today. What a partnership that can be. And, you and your husband, you went to the South Pole together. You have a new fabric for your relationship. And I have no doubt that that is really helping now. I suppose I'd finish up by just asking, for other people, for people who are listening, who might feel overwhelmed by loneliness, by grief, whether it is through just being alone or whether it is through illness, what could you tell them from your own experience, that might help them or encourage them?
Yeah, I think that when we feel, when we feel lonely, that, that is sort of a lot of times more of a negative feeling, I suppose. And I think that it's looking at that and saying, is there something I could be doing to help myself? But sometimes you cannot help yourself. Sometimes you need help. And so it's acknowledging that, hey, something isn't right, and I I'm going to reach out to others. I'm kind of just thinking back to like that moment that we talked about in the tent, where if you just are stuck, if you just feel stuck, reaching out beyond where you are to other people can move you to somewhere new for sure. And then on the other side of that, if we're talking more about the solitude or just sort of silence and stillness place, it's learning to feel, not run away from a feeling that may just be foreign to you and somewhat uncomfortable, because there are a lot of positive elements that can come out of that, because the stillness can really reveal things about yourself that you didn't know were there and help you learn and grow by just sort of sitting in it,
What a perfect way to end as well, because you've done that both in your mind and you've done it physically as well. That's what adventure is. That's perhaps realizing that life, there are always things you haven't experienced, but don't be afraid of experiencing them. Don't try and hide away from some of these feelings. Sometimes sit and try and understand, or try it, it helps you put them into perspective. So,
yeah, it's reminding me of the so silence isn't to be filled, it's to be felt. And that helped me a lot. I remember writing that in my book. Silence isn't to be filled, it's to be felt, because again, if that's something you're not familiar, if you're not comfortable with all that silence and we try to fill it, versus if we just let it expand and you feel what's there.
Yeah. And I've even found that, sometimes I would just stop doing what I'm doing and just spend 2 minutes or so just sitting there and not doing anything. And it's so rare how rarely we do that. We don't do that. Just 2 minutes, just 5 minutes, just sit there, and you, in just short moments
it shifts.
of time,
Things shift. Yeah.
Well, Chris, look, thank you so much for joining me today. It's absolutely fascinating, what you've been through, but how you talk about it as well. And I know you speak to lots of school children. You go to schools. You've written this incredible book, and I would just encourage everyone to read some of the work that you've done, because it is inspirational, and I think it'll help them too. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight.
Yeah, for me too. We'll be back in a moment with Searching for Heroes. Well, what a great pleasure to have Chris on. And I think she was the perfect person to start this theme of solitude about. And I love that line she said, which is, silence is not meant to be filled, but felt. And, I think what I took from Chris's story is that solitude isn't just an absence of company. It can be a mirror. So it can reflect our fears, but it can reflect our strengths. And I think perhaps it's when you can understand or see some of your truest thoughts. But I think it can also make you grow. Resilience can be shaped quietly, breath by breath, sometimes by yourself. And then it's balancing that by being around other people. And again, I think Chris laid that out so well, that, you can grow by yourself, but you need other people too. So it's not one or the other. I think life is about both. And we began this themed series today with solitude, because I think it touches so many kinds of heroism, whether it's on that frozen continent, whether it's in a hospital bed. And amazing that Chris has experienced both of those to a certain degree. Or perhaps if it's in the quiet moments right between life's storms. And it will teach us, I think, how to listen, teach us definitely how to endure. Certainly that's true in Chris's case. And more than anything else, I think it should teach us how to emerge stronger. So look, if today's episode sparked something inside you, please share it. And if you also have a story about solitude, please reach out to me, because I really want this podcast to be, more than anything, I want it to be a conversation. And I think that your voice matters here. So look, until next time, I'm Benjamin Hall. Stay strong and stay resilient. See you next time. Thanks for listening to Searching for Heroes. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.